An hour and a half, that's how long they made him wait? Until the CEO walked in and everything changed. The glass doors of Highland Crest Bank slid open, sending a burst of cool, air-conditioned breeze onto the sidewalk. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint scent of polished leather furniture. It was the kind of place that felt calm and efficient. Dorian Bennett stepped inside, adjusting his shoulders under his tailored blazer. He wasn't nervous. He had been in enough boardrooms, signed enough contracts, and built enough companies to know he belonged in rooms like this. Now he just needed them to recognize it too. His meeting was scheduled for exactly 11 a.m. There was no reason to expect anything less than professionalism. The lobby blended modern luxury with classic wealth, sleek glass walls, dark mahogany desks, and gold touches that caught the light just enough to remind you. This was a place where money lived. It was meant to impress. The receptionist, a woman with a neat bun and a distant look, barely glanced up when he approached. Her nameplate said, Melissa. "Welcome to Highland Crest Bank," she said, in a flat, automatic voice. "Do you have an appointment?" "Dorian Bennett," he replied, setting his leather portfolio on the counter. "I have a meeting with Linda Kramer at 11. Melissa typed quickly and checked her screen. "You're on the list," she said, still sounding uninterested. "You can have a seat. She'll be with you shortly." Dorian gave a small nod and walked over to the seating area. He picked a chair by the tall windows where sunlight cut across the polished floors in sharp, bright lines. Nearby, a group of well-dressed professionals stood chatting by the phones. They talked about market trends and investment deals, the kind of casual talk people had when they felt at home, when they belonged. Dorian's fingers tapped lightly on his briefcase. It was 10 a.m. He was early. He always was. The minutes passed, 11:05, 11:15. At first, he didn't think much of it. Delays happened, even at banks. But after 20 minutes, he started paying closer attention. A man in a grey suit, maybe in his early 30s, checked in at the front desk. Less than 5 minutes later, a young banker appeared and walked him through the frosted glass doors to the executive offices. Then a woman in a cream blazer came in. No appointment, as far as Dorian could tell. Just a friendly chat with Melissa, and she, too, was led inside. His name still hadn't been called. He looked at his watch again. 11:30 a.m. Something wasn't right. Dorian's fingers tapped again on the briefcase as he watched people come and go. Some walked in with the easy confidence of belonging, smiling, nodding, shaking hands with the staff. Others, like him, waited patiently. But, unlike him, they were being called. He had been waiting for 35 minutes. The meeting had been confirmed, twice. Still he sat in the same chair, watching at least 6 people go in ahead of him, even though they had arrived later. Still he stayed calm. He had seen this kind of thing before, those quiet, invisible walls people pretended weren't there. "Oh, we didn't mean to keep you waiting," they'd say. "Must have been a mix-up with the schedule." "Sorry about that. You know how things get." Excuses, wrapped in polite words. Dorian stood, keeping his face calm, and walked back to the front desk. Melissa looked up with the same unreadable expression. "Excuse me?" Dorian said, his voice steady but firm. "Has Linda Kramer been told I'm here?" Melissa let out a short breath, like he'd interrupted her train of thought. She started tapping on her keyboard without even looking at him. "She knows. She's just finishing with another client." He waited, expecting more, maybe a quick check, maybe an updated time, something. But she just went back to typing. "Do you have any idea when she'll be free?" he asked, keeping his tone level. Melissa barely glanced at the screen before offering a shrug. "Shouldn't be much longer." Dorian breathed out slowly, trying to stay calm. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. No concern, no effort. Just another empty reply meant to brush him off. And then, right in front of him, it happened again. A woman in a navy dress walked in, swinging a designer bag on her shoulder. She was talking on the phone, her voice light and relaxed. Melissa's whole posture shifted. Her tone softened, her mouth curved into something that looked like a real smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Lancaster," she said, her voice smoother. The woman gave a small nod and barely paused before a young banker appeared and walked her straight to the executive offices. No waiting, no questions, no soon. Dorian exhaled, slowly. He had been sitting there almost an hour. She had been inside in less than 60 seconds. He turned back to Melissa. "So do appointments matter here?" he asked. "Or is it just first come, first served?" For the first time, she looked slightly uneasy. "I told you, sir. She'll be with you soon." There it was again. Soon. A word that meant delay without saying it. A promise without any promise at all. A way to act like everything was fine, while clearly showing it wasn't. Dorian looked toward the frosted glass doors. It would have been easy to let it slide. Sit back down, wait another half hour and pretend nothing was wrong. But this wasn't just about waiting. It was about something bigger. He returned to his seat, telling himself to stay calm. He'd been through worse. He had built his company from the ground up. He'd faced cold investors, sat through meetings with people who didn't believe in him. But this was different. It wasn't about his business, or numbers, or pitches. It was about being ignored, being treated like he didn't even matter enough for a basic update. He checked his watch. 12:05 p.m., over an hour. He looked around the room again. No one else was waiting. Everyone who came in after him had been helped, greeted, or taken inside. Except him. Across the lobby, a young teller was talking to an older man in khakis and a golf shirt. Their chat was light, relaxed. Dorian tilted his head slightly to listen. "Yeah, I told her to just walk in," the man said with a laugh. "She doesn't even need an appointment. You know how it is." The teller smiled. "Well, for Mrs. Lancaster, we always make exceptions." Dorian's hand tightened around his briefcase. So that's how it worked. One set of rules for some, another for others. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the spotless floor. This was a moment of choice. Would he keep sitting there quietly, letting himself be overlooked? Or would he show that his time was just as valuable? He stood, not fast, not angry, just certain. He walked past the front desk, past Melissa's empty expression, and straight toward the frosted glass doors. "Sir," Melissa started. But he didn't stop. He pushed the door open. A hallway stretched out ahead of him, lined with private offices. Some doors were open, others closed. But one thing was clear right away. Linda Kramer wasn't in a meeting. She was sitting at her desk alone, typing on her laptop. She looked up as he walked in, and in a second, her face went from surprised to annoyed. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her tone sharp. "You were supposed to wait until you were called." Dorian met her eyes without flinching. "I did wait." Her fingers paused above the keyboard, her lips pressing into a tight line. "Please, have a seat," she said at last. Dorian sat, not because she told him to, but because he decided to. And something told him this meeting wasn't going to go the way she expected. Linda shifted the papers on her desk. Her face stayed carefully composed, but Dorian saw it, the tightness in her jaw, the flicker of irritation behind her eyes. "I'm sorry for the wait," she said, forcing a smile. "We've been incredibly busy today." Busy. Dorian let the word hang in the air for a moment. He'd seen at least 6 people get walked right past him like VIPs, some without appointments. He had waited in that lobby for an hour and a half. "Were you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "Because I noticed several clients walked in and were helped right away. Some didn't even have meetings scheduled." Linda's lips pressed tighter. "I assure you, Mr. Bennett, that wasn't intentional. There must have been a mix-up." "A mix-up," he repeated, his tone steady. "Interesting." Linda cleared her throat, clearly trying to move on. She opened a folder and began flipping through it. "Now about your loan application," she said, regaining that smooth, dismissive tone. "I've reviewed your file, and while your financials are strong, our lending standards are very strict right now. With the current economic environment, we'll need more security before moving forward." She had barely finished her sentence when the door swung open. The entire energy in the room changed. What had been a quiet hallway suddenly filled with the low murmur of serious voices. Not just any voices, these had authority. 3 men entered the office, all in sharp, custom suits. They had the unmistakable air of power. Dorian didn't have to guess who they were. These were the ones who really mattered in this place, the executives, the decision-makers. And leading them was someone he recognized, Richard Langford, Chief Executive Officer of Highland Crest Bank, and a man who definitely knew who Dorian was. Richard's sharp eyes scanned the room, stopping the moment he saw Dorian. His face brightened. "Dorian," he said, smiling wide. "What the hell are you doing here?" Linda froze. Dorian stood and shook Richard's hand firmly. "Hey, Richard. Been a while." "It has," Richard said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You still running Bennett's strategies?" "Still growing it," Dorian said, with ease. Linda glanced between them, her grip tightening around the folder in front of her. Richard turned to her now, his smile slowly disappearing. "How long has Dorian been waiting?" Silence. Linda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Dorian didn't answer right away. He let the moment hang, let the weight of it fill the room. "About an hour and a half," he said at last. Richard's face didn't change much, but Dorian saw the small twitch in his jaw. "An hour and a half," Richard repeated, his voice light, but not in a good way. "You had Dorian Bennett sitting out there for over an hour?" Linda started to speak. There was a scheduling issue. Richard didn't even look at her. His focus stayed on Dorian. "You should have called me," he said. "I would have made sure you were taken care of." Dorian gave a small, knowing smile. "Didn't think I needed to." Richard sighed and shook his head, turning back to Linda. The warmth was gone from his face. "Linda," he said, voice calm but firm, "step outside for a moment." Linda's face had gone pale, her hands clenched, then slowly relaxed. "Of course," she said quietly. She stood and walked out without saying another word. As soon as the door shut behind her, Richard turned back to Dorian, shaking his head again. "I don't know what happened," Richard said, "but I promise it won't happen again." Dorian didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. Even with Linda gone and the door closed behind her, the tension still hung in the air. Richard let out a slow breath and sat down across from Dorian. The 2 other executives stood nearby, exchanging quiet glances. "This isn't how we run things here," Richard said, calm but firm. Dorian tilted his head slightly. "Seems like it is." Richard didn't argue. He didn't offer excuses. Men like him, men in charge, knew when a situation had gone off the rails. And right now he was doing the math on how big this problem really was, because Dorian wasn't just another walk-in. He had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from the ground up. People respected his name, trusted his word, and now he had a story. Richard leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Tell me what happened," Dorian told him. The appointment, the waiting, the way others had been escorted ahead of him without question, Melissa's cold tone, Linda brushing him off like he didn't matter. He didn't dress it up. He didn't soften the truth. When he finished, the room went quiet. Then Richard sighed. "Thanks for telling me," he said. "And honestly, I'm pissed." Dorian raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Richard gave a short, dry laugh. "Because this kind of thing ruins reputations. We've spent years building this bank's credibility, and now I've got to clean up something I didn't even know was broken." He turned to one of the executives. "Get Linda off the floor. Now." The man nodded and stepped out without a word. Richard looked back at Dorian. "Your loan application, it's solid?" Dorian tapped his briefcase. Take a look. Richard opened the file and skimmed the first few pages. It didn't take long. This shouldn't have even been in question, he muttered. He handed it to the other executive. Fast track it. I want approval on my desk before the day's over. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Just like that? Richard met his gaze. You should have had it 2 hours ago. I'm fixing the mistake. But Dorian knew better. This wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even about respect. It was about control, about damage control, about stopping the story from spreading past these 4 walls. And Dorian? He understood that kind of game better than anyone. He stood. I'll take the approval, he said. But fixing my issue doesn't fix the real problem. Richard didn't move, but his eyes shifted just enough to give him away. We'll be talking more about that, he said. Dorian grabbed his briefcase, nodded, and headed for the door. On his way out, he met Melissa's eyes one last time. She didn't look so smug now. Outside, the heat of the afternoon hit him like a wall. The bank's sleek windows gleamed in the sun, but inside, the cracks had already formed. This wasn't just about a loan. It wasn't just about Linda. It was about something bigger, something deeper. It was about all the silent ways people are told, you don't belong here, the brushed-off greetings, the polite but empty smiles, the invisible barriers wrapped in professionalism, barriers that always came with excuses, but not today. Today, someone was held accountable, and next time Linda Kramer looked at her appointment list, she'd remember his name. Dorian checked his phone. Loan approved. He smiled to himself, slipped the phone into his pocket, and walked to his car. Because respect? It isn't given, it's earned. And today, he made sure they understood why his time mattered.